The wedding hall was buzzing with life, filled with laughter, chatter, and the soft clinking of glasses and cutlery. It was a grand celebration, with every detail carefully planned, from the sparkling chandeliers above to the delicate floral arrangements along the tables. Guests moved about, exchanging greetings, taking pictures, and enjoying the food and drinks served by a team of servers who moved swiftly and quietly among the crowd. One of these servers was a young woman who worked with a calm efficiency. She wore a simple uniform, her hair tied back neatly, and carried trays of drinks and plates with practiced grace. Few noticed her beyond the polite smile she offered when handing over a drink or clearing a plate. She had been working in hospitality for a few years, mostly in quiet restaurants and smaller events. She was known among her co-workers for being reliable, diligent, and patient. But beneath her calm exterior, she carried a passion that few had ever seen. Music had always been a part of her life. From a young age, she had spent hours at the piano, learning to express herself through the keys. She had never performed publicly, choosing instead to keep her talent private, practicing in her small apartment in the evenings after work. It was her secret world, a place where she could escape and create beauty without anyone watching. The night of the wedding was supposed to be just another evening at work. She moved from table to table, serving drinks and smiling politely, her eyes occasionally drifting toward the grand piano tucked in the corner of the hall. The instrument was beautiful, its polished wood gleaming under the warm lights, but it was meant to remain part of the background decor. Most guests didn't even notice it. She, however, felt a quiet pull toward it, a familiar comfort that reminded her of countless hours spent practicing alone. As the reception went on, a guest at one of the tables began to notice her more than the others. He was enjoying the party, sipping on a glass of champagne and watching the servers move around efficiently. He noticed her humming softly under her breath while arranging glasses on the table. The tune was gentle but carried a sense of rhythm and melody that caught his attention. Curious, he called out teasingly, "Can you play the piano?" She froze for a moment, startled. The question made her heart race, and she smiled politely, shaking her head. "Oh no, I just like to hum sometimes," she replied softly. She didn't want to draw attention to herself. She wasn't the type to show off, and she certainly wasn't expecting anyone to ask her to perform at a wedding. But the guest was persistent, his curiosity growing. "Come on, just a little. The piano is right there. I bet you could play something beautiful." He laughed lightly, thinking it would be a fun, harmless request. She hesitated, glancing at the grand piano. Her fingers itched to touch the keys, but a wave of nervousness washed over her. She hadn't played in front of strangers in years. She had always been afraid of failing or being judged. Despite her hesitation, there was something in the guest's tone that made her pause. It wasn't mockery. It was genuine interest and encouragement. Slowly, she nodded, a quiet agreement that she would try. She left her tray on a nearby table and walked toward the piano. Guests watched with mild curiosity, some whispering among themselves, expecting perhaps a short, simple tune. She sat down, taking a deep breath, her hands hovering over the keys. The room grew quieter, as if sensing something was about to happen. The first notes she played were soft, almost hesitant. A delicate melody filled the hall, and the guests began to pay attention. At first they exchanged polite smiles, thinking it was just a small gesture, a simple tune to entertain. But as her confidence grew, the music became richer, more expressive. Her fingers moved with ease, creating harmonies that were unexpected and beautiful. Each note seemed to flow naturally into the next, forming a melody that captured the attention of everyone present. The atmosphere in the hall began to change. The chatter and laughter faded, replaced by the sound of the piano. People stopped mid-conversation, turning their heads to listen. Some guests leaned in closer, curious to hear more. Even those who had come expecting a traditional wedding celebration found themselves captivated by the music. It was as if the melody had a life of its own, weaving through the room and touching everyone in a different way. She played with emotion and skill, her hands moving effortlessly over the keys. Memories of years spent practicing alone in her apartment came flooding back, and with each note she poured a piece of herself into the music. The guest who had asked her to play watched in amazement, unable to believe what he was hearing. He had expected a simple tune, maybe a short demonstration of talent, but this was something far beyond that. It was as if the piano had come alive, under her fingers filling the room with a sound that was both powerful and tender. Guests began to whisper among themselves, expressing their surprise. "Who knew she could play like that?" one said quietly. Another added, "She must have been practicing for years." The young woman remained focused, not noticing the growing attention. She was lost in the music, in the way the notes intertwined and created something beautiful out of nothing. For the first time that evening, she felt a sense of liberation, a moment where her secret talent could shine. As the melody continued, the reactions of the guests became more intense. Some were moved to tears, quietly dabbing at their eyes with napkins. Others smiled broadly, swaying slightly to the rhythm of the music. Even the bride and groom, busy with their own guests and celebrations, paused to listen. Their faces reflected a mixture of awe and admiration, recognizing the rare beauty of the moment unfolding before them. The young woman's performance was not just technically impressive, it was deeply emotional. She was telling a story through her music, conveying feelings that words could not capture. Each chord and each note carried meaning, resonating with the listeners in a way that felt personal and profound. It was clear to everyone that this was not just a casual skill. This was a gift, one that had been nurtured in private and now revealed at the perfect moment. As she played the final notes, the hall remained silent for a heartbeat, as if no one could believe what had just happened. Then slowly, applause began to ripple through the room. It started with a few guests clapping, then more and more joined in, until the sound filled the entire hall. Cheers and whistles followed, accompanied by words of praise and admiration. The young woman looked up from the piano, her face flushed with a mixture of pride and embarrassment. She had never experienced anything like this before, and the overwhelming response took her by surprise. The guest who had requested her to play approached her with a wide smile. "That was incredible. You have no idea how much everyone is amazed by your talent," he said. She smiled shyly, still trying to process the sudden attention. Others came forward, offering compliments and asking how she had learned to play so beautifully. She answered modestly, explaining that it had always been a passion, something she did quietly at home. But now her secret was out, and the reaction from the guests made her feel seen in a way she never had before. The moment marked a turning point. A young woman who had blended into the background of a busy wedding reception had captured the hearts of everyone in the hall. Her music had transformed an ordinary event into something unforgettable. It was a reminder that talent could be hidden in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes all it took was a small nudge, a simple request, to reveal the brilliance that had been waiting quietly beneath the surface. As the applause continued and the guests whispered their amazement, she felt a sense of fulfillment and joy that she had never known. She had shared a piece of herself, and in return, the world had stopped, just for a moment, to listen. The applause had barely died down when a hush fell over the crowd. The young woman at the piano hesitated for just a moment, her hands resting lightly on the keys. She had not expected such a reaction, and felt a mix of pride and nervousness. The guests were all looking at her now, their eyes wide with admiration and curiosity. It was a moment that felt unreal, as if the ordinary world of servers and guests had shifted into something magical and timeless. She looked around the room, seeing familiar faces from the earlier hustle of the reception now completely focused on her. Conversations had stopped, glasses were set aside, and even the waitstaff who were still busy at tables were stealing glances, whispering to each other in astonishment. Her fingers moved instinctively, and she began to play again, starting softly, letting the melody grow slowly, carefully and deliberately. Each note carried warmth and depth, capturing the attention of everyone in the hall. At first, the music was gentle and simple, like a whisper in the background, but as she continued, it became more intricate. She allowed herself to play the pieces she had been practicing for years in secret. The sound of the piano filled the hall, a pure, resonant, living thing that seemed to wrap around every person present. Guests leaned forward in their chairs, captivated by the harmony, unable to believe their ears. It was as if they were hearing music that they had always known, yet never experienced before. Her confidence grew with each passing moment. She closed her eyes briefly, feeling the keys beneath her fingers, letting the rhythm guide her. She thought about the long evenings she had spent alone, playing for no one, and realized that all those hours had prepared her for this very moment. She wasn't just playing notes anymore. She was telling a story. Each chord was a word, each melody a sentence. The guests were listening, completely immersed in her narrative without even realizing it. Some of the older guests were visibly moved. A few whispered to each other about the emotions that were stirring within them. They had attended countless events and heard many performers, but this felt different. There was authenticity and raw emotion in the way she played, something that could not be taught. The young woman's playing had a way of touching hearts, making the listeners feel something profound. Even those who were usually skeptical about live performances found themselves caught in the spell of her music. The bride and groom, who had been busy greeting other guests, paused near the back of the hall. They watched in awe as the music flowed from the piano. The bride clutched her bouquet tightly, her eyes shimmering with tears, while the groom stood beside her, clearly stunned. Neither of them had expected such a breathtaking moment during their reception. It was more than entertainment. It was a gift, an unforgettable memory that would remain with them for the rest of their lives. Among the guests, people started recording the performance on their phones, hoping to capture just a piece of the magic. But the young woman didn't play for the cameras or for recognition. She played for the joy it brought her, and for the connection she felt with the audience. She wanted them to experience what she had always felt while playing, a sense of freedom, expression, and unity. Music had a power that words often lacked, and she was discovering that it could bring people together in a way nothing else could. As the performance continued, a few guests quietly approached the piano. They didn't speak but simply watched, completely absorbed in the flow of music. One elderly man sat down at a nearby chair, resting his hands on his knees, his eyes closed, letting the melody wash over him. A young woman at another table leaned forward, whispering to her friend about the incredible skill of the pianist. The young woman at the piano felt a growing warmth inside her, not from the attention, but from the way the music connected with everyone around her. She began to experiment with the melody, adding subtle variations and flourishes that surprised even herself. Each improvisation brought a new reaction from the crowd. Some gasped quietly at the unexpected twists in the music. Others nodded along, smiling, their faces reflecting the joy and wonder of the moment. A few even laughed softly, caught up in the playful elements of her improvisation. The room had transformed from a regular wedding reception into a shared experience, where music had created a space for everyone to feel something extraordinary together. For a moment, she allowed herself to glance around the hall, noticing the expressions on the faces of the guests. The sense of awe and happiness was palpable. It struck her how small gestures like accepting a simple request to play the piano could ripple outward and create such a profound impact. She had been nervous at first, unsure if she could perform in front of strangers, yet now she felt a sense of accomplishment and connection that she had never anticipated. Her playing grew stronger, more confident as she felt the energy from the audience. She was no longer just a server at a wedding. She was a musician sharing her heart. The piano was no longer a piece of furniture, but an instrument of expression, a bridge between her world and the hearts of everyone present. She realized that her hidden talent, which she had always kept private, had the power to move people in ways she could never have imagined. As she approached the climax of her piece, the music swelled, filling every corner of the hall. The guests were captivated, some standing now, unable to contain their admiration. The room was silent except for the piano, and every note seemed to hang in the air, echoing in the hearts of those listening. It was a moment of pure connection, a reminder of the beauty and power of art, and the unexpected ways in which it can emerge. When she finally ended the piece, the room was still for a heartbeat. The silence was not awkward but reverent, a collective acknowledgement of the brilliance they had just witnessed. Then slowly applause erupted, growing louder and more enthusiastic. Guests clapped, cheered, and even whistled, their admiration overflowing. The young woman looked up, smiling shyly, her cheeks flushed with emotion. She had never imagined that her music could inspire such a response. The bride and groom were the first to reach her, their faces radiant with gratitude and joy. They thanked her profusely, praising not only her talent but also the courage it took to perform. The guests continued to surround her, offering compliments, asking questions, and expressing amazement. She responded with modesty, explaining that playing piano had been a lifelong passion and that she had practiced mostly in private. The warmth and genuine appreciation of the crowd made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced before. As the evening continued, the young woman returned to her duties, carrying trays and serving guests. But something had changed. She moved with a quiet confidence, a sense of pride and accomplishment radiating from her. The memory of the performance lingered in the air, and the guests kept talking about it, sharing their admiration and surprise with each other. She realized that her music had not only captivated the audience but had also created a lasting memory, something they would talk about long after the wedding was over. The young woman's life had shifted subtly that night. She had discovered the joy of sharing her talent openly, the exhilaration of connecting with others through music. For the first time, she understood that her abilities could inspire, touch hearts, and leave a lasting impression. It was a moment of transformation, where a simple request from a guest had led her to reveal a hidden part of herself to the world, and the response had been nothing short of magical. The applause from her last piece still echoed through the hall, but she didn't pause. She felt a quiet energy in the room, a connection with the audience that encouraged her to continue. She glanced briefly at the piano keys, letting her fingers find their familiar positions, and began to play again. This time the music was more flowing and expansive, a story unfolding through melody. Each note carried emotion, and she allowed herself to express feelings that words could not describe. Guests had grown still, leaning forward in their seats, whispering among themselves in awe. Some of them had seen many live performances before, but nothing compared to this. The young woman played with a mixture of delicacy and intensity that drew people in. Her hands moved gracefully across the keys, creating harmonies that felt alive. The music had a way of touching the soul, making people feel connected not only to her but to each other. There were smiles, tears, and quiet gasps, as though everyone was experiencing something rare and precious at the same time. She could sense the audience's fascination. People were watching her not just with admiration but with curiosity and wonder. Many of them leaned in, listening intently, as if the next note might reveal even more of the magic she carried within. Even those who had initially come for the wedding festivities found themselves caught in the spell of her music. The young woman played with such sincerity that it was impossible to ignore. It was not about showing off skill, but about sharing a piece of her heart. The melody she chose was gentle at first, but as she continued, it became more layered. She added subtle improvisations, creating unexpected harmonies that made the music richer. Her ability to combine technical skill with emotion left guests amazed. Some of them began to record the moment on their phones, eager to capture the memory of what they were witnessing. Others simply closed their eyes, letting the music take them somewhere beyond the ordinary celebration, into a space of beauty and emotion. The young woman felt herself becoming fully immersed in the performance. The music was no longer just sound. It was an expression of her thoughts, her experiences, and her emotions. She remembered the evenings she had spent alone, practicing quietly, and the moments of frustration and joy that had accompanied her learning. All of those hours, spent without recognition or audience, had led to this very moment. It was as if the piano had become an extension of her soul, allowing her to communicate directly with everyone in the room. Guests were visibly moved. Some were leaning on tables, whispering to friends about how extraordinary it was that a server could play with such depth. A few older guests dabbed at their eyes, caught off guard by the beauty and emotion of the performance. Even the children at the event were captivated, their eyes wide and focused on her hands as they moved across the keys. It was a shared experience that transcended age, background, and expectation. She began to play a piece she had improvised, one that told a story without words. It had moments of tension, release, joy, and sorrow, and each shift in the music reflected the complexity of emotions she wanted to convey. The hall was silent except for the piano, every note resonating through the wooden floors, the chandeliers, and into the hearts of the listeners. The young woman could feel the audience's attention and energy, and it gave her courage. She played more boldly, letting her imagination and emotions guide her hands. The bride and groom had stopped all other activities to watch her. They were mesmerized, realizing that the young woman's music had turned an ordinary wedding reception into something unforgettable. The bride's eyes glistened with tears, and the groom's jaw was slightly open in amazement. They exchanged glances, both understanding that they were witnessing something rare, a moment that would be remembered not just for the celebration, but for the music and emotion that filled the air. As she continued, she noticed the reactions of the guests around her. Some were leaning forward, holding hands with loved ones, feeling the music connect them. Others were smiling quietly, moved by the beauty and sincerity of her playing. The young woman realized that she had never imagined her music would have such an impact on so many people. It was a humbling and joyous feeling. She began to play with more confidence, adding small flourishes and variations that elevated the music even further. She allowed herself to be playful in her improvisation, experimenting with different rhythms and melodies. The guests reacted with delight, some laughing softly at unexpected twists, others nodding along to the rhythm. The room seemed to pulse with energy, the music creating a shared experience that brought everyone closer together. Even those who had been quietly observing the wedding began to engage with the music, swaying, tapping fingers, or simply closing their eyes to savor the moment. Time seemed to stretch. Minutes felt like hours, and the young woman felt completely absorbed in the act of creating. She had never performed in front of such a large audience, but in that moment, she felt a sense of freedom and confidence she had never known. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a voice for her emotions and a bridge to the hearts of everyone present. As the piece reached its conclusion, she allowed the final notes to linger, letting them resonate fully before lifting her hands from the keys. The room was silent for a heartbeat, everyone caught in the intensity of what they had just experienced. Then slowly, applause began, soft at first, then growing louder until it filled the entire hall. Cheers, whistles, and claps came from all directions. The young woman looked up, smiling shyly, overwhelmed by the positive response. Her heart raced, but she felt proud and fulfilled. Guests approached her, offering heartfelt compliments and asking how long she had been playing. Many expressed disbelief that someone who had appeared as a quiet server could possess such incredible talent. She explained modestly that playing piano had been a lifelong passion, a personal journey mostly kept private. The warmth and genuine appreciation of the audience made her feel recognized and valued in a way she had never expected. It was a moment of validation, proof that her years of quiet dedication had meaning and power. The bride and groom returned to her side, expressing their admiration and gratitude. They told her that she had created one of the most memorable moments of their wedding, something that guests would talk about for years. Their sincerity and emotion made her smile, feeling a sense of accomplishment that went beyond the applause. It was a reminder that sharing her talent could create joy and connection, turning a simple wedding reception into a moment of shared wonder and delight. As the young woman returned to her duties, serving food and drinks, she noticed the lingering excitement in the room. Guests continued to talk about the performance, sharing their astonishment and admiration. Even the other servers and staff whispered among themselves, impressed by her skill and bravery in stepping forward. It was clear that the young woman had left an unforgettable impression on everyone present, a reminder that hidden talents can shine brightly when given the chance. She felt a quiet sense of transformation. The night had revealed a part of her that she had always kept private, and the response from the audience had given her confidence and joy. The young woman realized that her music had the power to inspire, move, and unite people in ways she had never imagined. It was a moment that she would carry with her forever, a memory of how courage and passion can create extraordinary experiences. The audience in turn had been given a gift, a beautiful reminder of the magic that can emerge unexpectedly, even from the most ordinary of people. The music had stopped briefly, but the energy in the hall lingered, thick and electric, like a heartbeat that wouldn't fade. The young woman had returned to her duties, her hands now holding trays, moving between tables, yet every step carried a subtle new confidence. Something inside her had shifted, a quiet understanding that she had touched lives with something deeply personal. Guests continued to murmur in admiration, their eyes often turning toward the corner where the piano sat, as if expecting her to return at any moment. For a while, she simply observed. The smiles on people's faces, the spark in their eyes, and even the quiet tears in some corners of the hall made her realize how much music could convey without a single word. The groom was speaking to some family members, gesturing with excitement, and the bride had turned to the guests near her, whispering, pointing occasionally toward the piano, their joy unmistakable. It wasn't just about talent anymore. It was about connection, and in that moment everyone seemed to feel the shared magic she had created. A few guests approached her, asking if she would play another piece. Some were shy in their request, almost whispering, afraid to impose, while others were more direct, insisting with excitement. She felt a twinge of nervousness. She hadn't expected to be asked again, and performing twice at a wedding where she had been a simple server was a strange new reality. But as she looked at the expectant faces around her, she felt a warm surge of courage. There was something powerful about offering her music willingly, letting it flow naturally, and she realized she wanted to share more. She walked slowly to the piano, each step measured yet confident. Guests leaned forward, some standing now as the energy shifted. The hall seemed quiet, the sound of glasses and cutlery fading, replaced by an eager anticipation. She took a deep breath, placed her hands on the keys, and began again. This time her music was different. It carried layers of emotion, a tapestry of moods woven together through melody. Each note was deliberate yet playful, and she allowed herself to explore the depth of her talent fully. The audience responded almost instinctively, their focus complete, their hearts open. The piece she played was longer, more complex, yet entirely accessible. She added soft crescendos and gentle pauses, drawing listeners into the ebb and flow of the music. Some guests closed their eyes, letting the melody wash over them. Others whispered to their neighbors, amazed at the skill and emotion. There was laughter, soft tears, and countless wide-eyed expressions of wonder. Even those who were initially skeptical about a server performing music were now captivated. The young woman had transformed from a quiet presence in the background to the heart of the event. She thought about the hours she had spent practicing alone, the moments when her fingers stumbled and her confidence faltered. Those private struggles had shaped her, built her skill, and prepared her for this moment. As her fingers moved expertly over the keys, it was as though she were telling a story of perseverance and courage, silently sharing her journey with everyone listening. Each note carried meaning, and each chord echoed the effort and dedication that had brought her to this point. The room had fallen into a serene trance. Guests seemed suspended in time, their attention fully captured by the music. The bride and groom were now standing near the piano, their hands intertwined, eyes reflecting awe and joy. They whispered to each other, marveling at the unexpected gift that had appeared at their wedding. It wasn't just entertainment. It was an experience that made the celebration unforgettable, a memory etched deeply into the hearts of everyone present. Her music flowed effortlessly, moving through gentle passages and more intense moments. She experimented with dynamics, playing softly to draw listeners in, then rising to more powerful chords that made the room vibrate with energy. It was a dance of emotion, a silent conversation between her and the audience. She noticed small gestures, children tilting their heads in curiosity, elderly guests nodding in appreciation, couples holding hands tightly, and friends exchanging astonished glances. Every response encouraged her, creating a feedback loop of energy and inspiration. As she approached the climax of the piece, she felt a sense of exhilaration. Her fingers danced over the keys with confidence and joy, the music resonating with every corner of the hall. The guests, now fully engrossed, reacted instinctively. Soft gasps, whispers of admiration, and a quiet murmur of excitement. The young woman realized that she had created something greater than herself, a shared experience that touched each person uniquely, yet connected everyone in a common emotional thread. The final notes lingered in the air, a delicate echo that made the room pause in reverence. The silence that followed was immediate, but it was not uncomfortable. It was a collective moment of reflection, where every listener absorbed the power and beauty of what they had just experienced. Then applause erupted, first softly, then swelling into a thunderous wave. The hall shook with claps, cheers, and whistles of appreciation. The young woman looked up, smiling humbly, her face flushed with emotion. It was an overwhelming feeling, a mixture of pride, relief, and gratitude. Guests rushed forward, some trying to shake her hand, others offering compliments or asking how she had developed such talent. They were genuinely astonished that someone who had appeared to be a quiet server possessed such a skill. she answered with modesty, explaining that she had practiced in private for years and had never performed publicly before. The warmth and sincerity of the guests' admiration made her feel acknowledged and valued, a feeling she had seldom experienced in her everyday work. The bride and groom returned to her, expressing heartfelt thanks. They shared how deeply the music had impacted them, how it had made their wedding feel extraordinary. The joy in their voices and the tears in their eyes were genuine and touching. They told her that she had given everyone at the wedding a gift far greater than they could have imagined, and that this moment would be remembered for years to come. She smiled, realizing that her decision to play, prompted by a simple request, had led to something far beyond what she could have anticipated. The hall continued to buzz with energy as the applause settled. Conversations resumed, but the excitement was different now, infused with wonder and joy. Guests discussed the performance repeatedly, some still staring in awe at the piano where she had played. Even the staff who had been working throughout the evening whispered about her talent, sharing astonishment at the unexpected brilliance they had witnessed. The young woman, returning to her duties once more, carried a quiet pride. Her world had shifted subtly that night, and she felt a new sense of confidence and purpose. As she moved among the tables, she noticed small gestures of recognition, a nod, a smile, a whispered word of appreciation. It was clear that her music had left a lasting impression, and she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had not only shared her talent, but had also touched the hearts of everyone present. The experience had revealed to her the power of courage, the value of sharing hidden gifts, and the extraordinary potential of ordinary moments. The young woman continued to serve, her mind replaying the performance in her head, feeling the warmth and admiration of the audience linger. She understood that what had started as a simple act of kindness, responding to a guest's playful request, had blossomed into a defining moment of connection and recognition. It was a memory she would carry with her always, a reminder that courage, passion, and a willingness to share can create magic in the most unexpected ways. The evening continued, but the hall remained alive with the memory of her music, an invisible thread connecting every guest to the quiet brilliance of a server who dared to play. The evening was winding down, yet the energy in the hall remained vibrant. The guests continued to talk quietly, some lingering in groups to discuss the unforgettable performance, while others shared videos on their phones, ensuring that this memory would last beyond the walls of the reception. The young woman moved among the tables one final time, carrying trays and offering polite smiles, but her mind was elsewhere. She replayed the music in her head, feeling the echoes of applause and the warmth of the guests' admiration. It was a sensation she had never experienced before, a quiet thrill that filled her with pride and a sense of belonging. As she walked past the piano, her fingers brushed the polished keys. She paused, feeling the familiar texture beneath her fingertips, and remembered the hours she had spent alone, practicing in secret. Every late night, every small frustration, every moment of joy she had found while playing, all of it had led to this evening. She had always loved music for herself, never seeking recognition, yet here she was, having shared her talent with an audience that appreciated it deeply. The realization filled her with a quiet, glowing satisfaction. Guests who had noticed her standing near the piano began approaching, eager to express their gratitude once more. One older woman reached out to shake her hand, eyes shining. "Your music has made this night unforgettable," she said. Another guest, a young man with a camera, shared the videos he had taken, insisting she look at them. Each expression of appreciation reinforced the feeling that she had contributed something meaningful to the celebration. It wasn't just about talent. It was about connection, and she felt the invisible bonds forming around her. The bride and groom found her again, walking toward her with smiles and tears mingled in their expressions. They thanked her sincerely, expressing how much her music had transformed the evening. "We will never forget this," the bride said, voice soft but trembling. The groom nodded, adding, "It felt like the music came from somewhere magical. You've given everyone something we'll always remember." Their words touched her deeply, and she realized that she had created more than a performance. She had created a memory that would remain in the hearts of everyone present. Word began to spread quietly among the remaining guests. Some mentioned how rare it was to encounter someone with such hidden talent, especially someone who had seemed so ordinary at first glance. Others speculated about her background, wondering how someone could possess such skill without it being widely known. The young woman listened politely, smiling modestly, but inside she felt a quiet pride. She had revealed a piece of herself, and the response had been overwhelming. It was a validation not just of her talent, but of her courage to step forward when asked. The atmosphere in the hall had shifted completely. What had begun as a traditional wedding reception had evolved into an experience filled with awe, emotion, and a shared sense of wonder. Guests had stopped thinking about the food, the decorations, and the other typical elements of the evening. Instead, they were focused on the music, the talent, and the way a simple act of sharing had transformed the entire event. Even those who had initially been indifferent found themselves drawn in, captivated by the depth and sincerity of the performance. The young woman found herself approached by several other servers and staff members who had been working throughout the evening. They whispered words of admiration, expressing astonishment at her skill and bravery. Some confessed that they had suspected she was talented, but no one had imagined anything like this. Their acknowledgement meant something special to her, because it came from people who knew her in a context where she had always blended into the background. For once, she felt recognized and celebrated by peers as well as guests. Later, as the last few guests began to leave, she returned to the piano one final time. She hesitated, then sat down and played a soft, gentle melody. It wasn't meant for applause or recognition this time. It was for herself, a moment of personal reflection, a closing of a chapter in the evening that had become unforgettable. The notes flowed effortlessly, soothing and delicate, allowing her to savor the magic of the night in a private, intimate way. The hall was nearly empty, but the memory of earlier applause and reactions seemed to resonate with every key she played. As the piano quieted, she rose and took a final look around the hall. The decorations glimmered softly under the lights. The tables were scattered with empty glasses and plates, and the air was filled with a lingering warmth of joy and celebration. She felt a sense of completion and contentment. The night had revealed something she had kept hidden, and in doing so, it had changed her in subtle but meaningful ways. She realized that her music was not just a talent, but a bridge to the hearts of others, capable of inspiring, connecting, and creating memories that would endure. The bride and groom approached one last time, hugging her gently. "Thank you for making this night so special," the groom said. "You've created a memory we will treasure forever." She nodded, words unnecessary, feeling the depth of their gratitude and the sincerity of the moment. Even as the reception came to an end and the hall emptied, the impression of her music lingered. Guests would recall the night not just for the celebration of a wedding, but for the unexpected brilliance of a server who had revealed her extraordinary talent. In the following days, the story began to spread. Guests shared videos, recounted their experiences to friends and family, and talked about the young woman who had stunned everyone with her piano performance. Social media posts and messages praised her skill and humility, and people marveled at how a quiet, hard-working server could create such a powerful, unforgettable experience. The young woman watched the attention grow with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. She never sought recognition, but the warmth and appreciation of others inspired her to embrace opportunities she had previously shied away from. The performance opened new doors for her. Invitations to perform at private events, gatherings, and celebrations began to arrive. Some offers were small, others more formal, but each one acknowledged the talent that had previously been hidden. Despite the attention, she remained grounded, remembering the simple joy of playing for herself and for those who truly appreciated her music. The memory of the wedding reception, the smiles, tears, applause, and heartfelt gratitude remained a guiding moment, reminding her why she played and why sharing her gift mattered. She continued working in hospitality, but her outlook had changed. Every interaction, every moment of service, carried the quiet confidence that came from knowing she had something extraordinary within her. The experience reminded her that talent and passion, even when hidden, could touch lives in profound ways. A single evening, prompted by a simple request, had revealed her brilliance to the world, and the impact was both humbling and empowering. As she reflected on the events, she understood that the night had not only changed how others saw her but also how she saw herself. She had discovered the courage to step into the spotlight even briefly, and had experienced the joy of connecting with others through her art. It was a lesson in bravery, humility, and the power of sharing one's passions. The young woman realized that hidden talents can shine unexpectedly, and that sometimes the smallest opportunities can create the most lasting memories. In the quiet moments after the wedding, as she packed up her things and walked home, she felt a sense of fulfillment she had never known. The applause, the smiles, the tears, and the words of gratitude echoed in her mind. She had been an ordinary server for most of the evening, unnoticed in the bustling crowd, and yet she had become the highlight of the celebration. It was a reminder that extraordinary moments can come from ordinary people, and that courage, skill, and authenticity can create memories that last far longer than any decoration, meal, or event. The young woman knew that the story of that night would remain with her forever, a beacon of what was possible when she allowed herself to step forward. The wedding reception had become more than a simple event. It had become a turning point, a moment of transformation that revealed her hidden talent to the world and left a lasting impression on all who were present. She smiled, knowing that the music, the connections, and the joy she had created would resonate long after the lights were turned off and the hall was empty, a testament to the quiet brilliance that can reside in anyone who dares to share their gift.